In this second part of uploading tour images, we are now going to process all of them. But before we start doing that, there's actually something that I need to fix in the user controller. And so actually in this resize user photo, and that is that we actually need to await this whole operation here. All right. So all of this here will actually return a promise. And that makes sense, right? Because all of these operations here, they take some time. And so of course they happen in the background. So they are asynchronous code. And so obviously they should not block the event loop. Now the problem here is that right now we're calling this next function here, so the next middleware, without actually waiting that these operations here finish. And that is not a good idea. And so let's simply use await here. And then of course async and all that stuff. So catch async then here. All right, give it a save, and that's much better. And so now we're actually going to do something very similar with our tour images. And so actually let me go ahead and copy this. All right, and although it's not going to be exactly the same, it's good to already have it here. So this one will also be an async function. All right. Now, just as before, in case there are no images uploaded, then we want to move straight to the next middleware. So if there are no request.files, and actually I'm going to take it one step further, requiring that there is both the image cover and also images. And so basically we want to move to the next middleware in case there is no request.files.image cover or no request.files.images. So in that case, next. Okay, and now let's start by processing the cover image. And then afterwards, all of the other images in a loop, basically. So other images. Now, where do we actually get the cover image? Well, remember how I said that it is at request.files, no longer file, and then .cover image, or actually image cover, and then remember how it was an array. So let's take a look at that one more time. Right? So all of this is request.files, and then from there we take image cover, and that is an array of one element. And so now we want the element number 0, and then .buffer. So this weird looking thing here. Then we want to resize it to a 2:3 ratio, and the width will be 2000 pixels, and the height 1333. All right. And so again, that's a nice 3:2 ratio, which is very common in images. Next, we also want to format as a JPEG with 90% quality, and then save it as a file. But this time it is to image/tours. And here, let's actually define our file name separately. All right, because we're actually going to need it again. So image cover file name. And so once more, we now need to create a unique file name. So now it's tour. And then let's again put the ID of the tour here, where before it was the ID of the user. And so that is at request.params. So remember that this route will always contain the ID of the tour, and so therefore it's on request.params.id. Then again the timestamp, date.now, and then let's say that this one is the cover image. Okay, and the other ones will then get some numbers. And then of course .jpeg. And so let's use that here. So image cover file name. Okay, and now as a one last step, we actually need to make it possible that our update tour handler then picks up this image cover file name to update it in a current tour document. Okay, so let's quickly take a look at how the document is actually updated. And so we're very simply using this update1 factory function. And that one will actually simply update all of the data that's in the body onto the new document. So just to prove that to you, right here. So update1, it takes in the entire request.body. Okay, and so now the secret is to actually put this image cover file name on request.body. All right. So request.body .cover image, and again, it's called image cover instead, should be equal to image cover file name. Okay, makes sense. And of course, it is called image cover because that is the name that we have in our schema definition. And so then when it's doing the update, it will then match this field in the body with the field in our database. And actually, we can refactor this a bit because we don't really need this variable name here at all. So we could simply put this file name here right on the body. So put that here and then use it here right away. So we don't need this line of code at all. Great. And now before moving on to the other images, let's actually test it with what we already have at this point. So let's get just rid of this console.log. And so when we now do the request, then our cover image should already be uploaded and be put into the tour document. Okay, so these other three images here, of course not, but at least the image cover should now be working at this point. At least if we did everything correct. So let's see if it is somewhere here. And images is still empty, obviously. But I'm searching now for the cover image. So where is that? And here it is. So image cover. And so that looks a lot like the file name that we just specified. And let's actually try to reload our all tours page here. And maybe our new tour is already here. Here we go. So that is the new mountain biker tour. And this here is indeed the image that we just uploaded. So beautiful. Now if we try to open up this page, then the other images are not here. All right, so they are nowhere to be found. And so of course, that's what we're going to do next. All right. So remember that our images here are also an array, which then contain all of these new file uploads. And so let's now actually use a loop to process each of them in one iteration. So request.files.images.forEach. And then our callback function in which we get access to the current file. All right. Now here we do actually need to create the current file name, and you will see why in a second. So file name equals, and then something very similar to this, with the difference that now it is not cover, but instead we want to call them 1, 2, and 3. And so in our callback function, we actually also get access to the current index. Okay. So we need file and I for index. And so here it is not cover, but index plus 1. So plus 1, and that's just because this index is 0 based. All right. Next up comes the processing step itself, which is again very similar to this one. And now we of course need to mark this one here as async as well. All right. And down here it is now the file name. Okay. Now, why do we actually need this file name? Well, we need it because now we need to push this file name into request.body.images. And so that's the exact same logic as we had here before on request.body.imageCover. So remember that in our collection, request.body.images is actually an array. And so now we need to create that array and start it as an empty array. So request.body promise.images as an empty array, and then in each iteration we will then push the current file name to this images array. So request.body.images.push the file name. Alright, and with this we're almost done. There's just one small problem, which is the fact that we're actually not using async await correctly here in this case, so in this loop. And that's because this async await here is only inside of this callback function of the for each loop. And so that will actually not stop the code from moving right next to this line where we then call the next middleware. Okay, so again, right now we're actually not awaiting any of this here. Again, because this async await happens inside of the callback function of one of these loop methods. And we run into this kind of problem actually before, but there is fortunately a solution for this. Because since this is an async function here, it will return a new promise. And so if we do a map, we can then actually save an array of all of these promises. And then if we have an array, we can use promise.all to await all of them. And so with that, we will then actually await until all this code, and in this case, until all this image processing is done, and only then move on to the next line, which is calling the next middleware to really update the tour documents. And if we didn't do that in this case, it would really not work at all. Because without this pushing here, the request.body.images would still be empty when we call next. And so therefore, none of these image names would then be persisted into the document. Okay, so let's now use promise.all. And actually, I'm not even saving this array here to a new variable. Instead, I will use promise.all right away on this. So await promise.all on the array returning from this. Okay, so I hope that made sense. So now let's actually log the body here to the console. All right. And so with this, we should now be ready to upload all of our images. All right, so let's go down here and try this again. All right, so where is our images array? Well, maybe it was somewhere up here. Ah, here it is. So I missed that somehow. And that looks very promising, right? So 3 nice images. Let's now take a look here at our page. Ah, there they are, but not quite correct, right? So it looks as if we simply uploaded the cover image 3 times. So take a look at Postman. But the image names are actually correct. And so there's something wrong in our processing there. Let's take a look also at request.body. Oh, and I forgot to actually put it here. Okay, but I think it's not even necessary because we just saw in Postman that the file names are actually correct. So we don't need this one anymore. Let's just take a look at the file names that we just uploaded. So that's in public and tours. And so here there are. So this was probably the first one from the last test. And so as you see, all of them are indeed the exact same image. So cover 1, 2, and 3 are the same images. And so that's not correct. And I can see actually right away what the problem is. So you see that we're actually reading still request.files.imageCover and not the file from the current iteration of this loop. Okay, so instead that should be file.buffer. All right, so let's actually go ahead and delete all of these. All right, and simply try it again now. So let's send that, names appear still to be correct. But now when we reload this, let's see. That looks correct. Beautiful, beautiful. You see the images are all nicely formatted. Even this one, which was, remember, in portrait and not even in landscape, but we basically cropped that and it still looks beautiful. Okay, so here we can now confirm that so that it's actually in the 2000 by 1333 pixels. Alright, it's still a little bit on the big side here, so maybe we could reduce the quality a little bit more, but that's not really important. What matters here is that the logic that we just applied here really works. So, just to quickly recap what we did in these two lectures. So we created a Multer upload using the memory storage and this filter only for images. Then we created the upload tour image middleware by using upload.fields, which takes in one image cover and 3 images. And then on the request, it will put the files property like this. Alright, then in our next middleware, we resize these images. And first the cover image and then the remaining 3 images. And what's really important to note here is how we put the image file names on request.body. And we do that so that in the next middleware, which is the actual route handler, it will then put that data onto the new document when it updates it. Okay? So we do that with the image cover, and we also do that with the remaining images by pushing it into body.images, which, as we know from our tour schema, expects an array of strings, and so in this case, file names. So about these other images, we had them on request.files.images. So it's an array, and so of course we loop through it using map. And we use map so that we can basically save the 3 promises, which are the result of these 3 async functions here. So we can then await all of them here using promise.all. Okay? And only after that, we then move onto the actual tour update handler. Okay? And this part is really important. So it's important that we only move on to the next middleware as soon as this part here is really completed, because otherwise request.body.images will be empty, and of course our file names are then not going to be saved to the current tour document. Alright? And that actually wraps up the image or file uploading part of this section. So I hope that was fun. I know that for me it was really cool. So I really like this kind of stuff, which makes my applications feel like really real world. Anyway, hope you enjoyed it, and I see you in the next one.